Manager.
Good morning.
You got two new people at least I know in the room that you need to introduce.
Absolutely. We got two we're going to introduce first. I'll let Tom introduce his new hire, and then Tim will introduce new CommCare coordinator.
Right. Okay. I'll go first. After a rigorous process, we hired an HR director. Her name is Sheena Smuts. She sits right by Lindsay over here. Many people at this table helped with the process. We had all department heads and the sheriff, and I think when she came into the room, she was surprised at how many people was in the room to talk with her. Sheena comes to us with a good experience. She was with the county from 05 to 10 as an intern and also worked in HR. And then she became the HR director in Liberal, Kansas for the last several years. So she's coming home again to Sedgwick County. She has a master's degree in public administration and good HR experience. She also has the ability to work within a team and is a good listener, and that's really what I think the panel really liked about her. So we are very fortunate to have her, and we want to welcome her here today.
Thank you. Welcome.
I might also add, I want to thank publicly while she's here Bethany, who has been the interim for the last several months. She did a wonderful job and will be a great asset to Sheena over in HR. So I want to thank her publicly.
All right, Tim.
And I have with me, also after an extensive lengthy search, Jen Wilson, who is the new behavioral health coordinator for Gulf County. She is a former CommCare employee who worked as a case manager, as a therapist, and a program manager, and she's worked in the homeless arena most recently, and so she's experienced the continuum of care, which is a comprehensive approach to homelessness in the community. I think the skills that she's developed there and the relationships that she's developed there will really be a benefit to her as she does similar work with coordinating the behavioral health response to the community. So we're really glad to have her. She's got great experience and skills, and she's homegrown as well, so that's always nice.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right, the only thing we have on the agenda today, the best thing here is Karen Page from Kansas Global. She'll give you an export plan update.
Morning, Commissioners. We're pleased to have Karen Page with us today. As you know, she's the President and CEO of Kansas Global Trade Services, an organization which you have been supporting financially. She's here today to talk about the impacts to the economy and to jobs as a result of those exports. I think she's going to tell you what you're getting for your money. So I'll turn it over to Karen.
Oh, gosh, at the table.
Morning, Karen. Welcome back.
Thank you. I really like this format. It's like you can ask me questions, so it feels a little bit more comfortable. I didn't wear my watch today so I could get through security easier, so if I'm running long, y'all let me know, but I put my phone up here so I can try to keep track of time. Do I need to use this microphone? Okay. And Brent kindly prepared for you some handouts, so I wanted to call your attention to what you have there. In case you want to refer to it or ask me questions about it, you have a copy of my presentation for today, and then you should also have a copy of the most recent year-to-date quarterly report for the export plan, which ends Q3 of 2018. So it looks like this. And then you also have, looks like this, with the red on the front. And it says, if you look at the top, Q3 2018. And then you also have for the end of Q4 2017. In case you all are keeping track year by year, this will provide you with what was going on up until the end of last year. I also provided to you what we call the export dashboard. Looks like this. This is export data for the state, for the 10-county region, and then it goes into the MSA, the Wichita MSA, and then it goes into each county in the 10-county region. So Sedgwick County has its own dashboard. This is information that we've been keeping track of in addition to the quarterly performance report for the past 4 years. We provide this to the state, to the city of Wichita, to all the export plan funders and all the counties. We also, in case you're interested in a different view of this, we also, a couple of years ago, rearranged the data in order to provide the same kind of information, an export dashboard, for each of the 4 federal districts in Kansas. So we have one for District 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when we're talking to Congressman Ron Estes, he has the information in front of him. And if you have any questions, it's up to you. If you'd like to ask me questions as we go, I'm fine with that as well. Just get my attention. So we're going to talk about the export plan update today. I'm going to focus on the benefit to our community. Some of you, I apologize, might have seen some of these slides before if you've been to a recent presentation, but this presentation was updated especially for you. Agenda is quite simple. We're going to talk about how exports impact our community, and then how exports affect local businesses, and then we'll talk specifically about the export plan. So we're going to start a little bit higher view and go down to a micro level. As a reminder, in case some of you don't know, I know that there was 2 new staff introduced in the room, but some of you may not know what Kansas Global does aside from running the export plan. We are a nonprofit local organization. We are fee-based, so in addition to managing the export plan, companies who receive individual benefit are charged for their services if they so choose to avail themselves of those services. We help companies export through research, answering questions, managing the export plan, as I mentioned. We also promote exporting as a business growth option in this community and throughout the state. Last year, we were honored with the Presidential Award for Export Service by current U.S. Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross in Washington, D.C. The selection committee noted our customized research and management of the export plan as best practices in the nation. You can thank yourselves for your role in making letting us have the opportunity to manage the export plan, in which we could be recognized globally, and that is really recognition for not just Kansas Global's management of it, but certainly of the community's leadership in that. So I'd like to talk about what would happen to our economy without trade, and if you could put on your thinking caps for a minute and help me explain this to you. If we didn't have trade in Sedgwick County, what would happen? Anyone have an idea?
Start losing jobs.
We'd lose jobs. Thank you, Commissioner. Anything else? That's an obvious one. Big one, right? This is a big one. Can you tell me what is positive when we have trade in our economy? So we have jobs.
You bring in external dollars.
External dollars. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely perfect. So let me give you a few more examples. Some of the negatives that we have when we have trade in our community are concerns over fairness, income distribution, social justice, jobs moving, that sort of thing. When you look at national economies, jobs are both created and lost when you have trade as a result of openness to trade. And the quality of jobs is also affected in different ways through trade. Remember, we're starting at a high level view. For a community, for a positive, is that it actually helps to lift millions out of poverty. It accelerates capital accumulation. We have increased foreign investment. So when you look at the numbers and you follow the trade numbers, you actually find over time that where there are greater exports, there's greater foreign direct investment as well. I'll talk about the company view a little bit more, but and basically it supports more jobs and actually boosts productivity, hones competitiveness, and reduces the average cost of manufacturing production, as a few examples. Exporters have been shown to be more skill and capital intensive. to display higher productivity and to pay higher wages than non-exporting firms. And these same characteristics differentiate exporting and non-exporting firms regardless of the size of the firm. So it's not just for large firms, it's also true for small firms. So, number of jobs. Commissioner Dennis talked about 40,000 jobs are supported by exports in the Wichita metro area. What does it mean that we, to Wichita, that we export? Let's talk about what it means if we don't. So what does 40,000 jobs look like? Anyway, I don't know if you all have trouble with this, but I hear big numbers. It's hard for me to imagine, really see it. And so we're going to give you a nice visual. Actually, it fills Kauffman Stadium twice, where the Royals play, and Kauffman Stadium once, and Intrust Arena twice. So I'm sure you all have been to those facilities. Intrust Bank Arena, I've been there when it's filled to the gills. So fill that up twice and add Kauffman Stadium, and that's how many 40,000 people are. 40,000 people. That's a lot of people who would not have jobs if we didn't have exports in our community. Going to the dollars, $7.2 billion of goods and services were sold to international markets in 2017. For Sedgwick County specifically, you have the brunt of that, $5.49 billion of exports, supporting about 30,000 of those 40,000 total jobs in the MSA. Top industries were transportation equipment, that's airplanes and aircraft parts, and it makes up 70% of the total exports in this area. Other industries include machinery, chemical manufacturing, and travel and tourism. So if those of you who've been fighting any of the battles that we have about our public image, and they say, oh, Wichita's a flyover state or Kansas is a flyover state, travel and tourism is one of our largest exports. So you have some ammunition to combat any of those naysayers. It represents 20% of our economy, so 20%, 20 cents on every dollar is because we export. Why are we able to do this? We're experts in producing products the world wants to buy. In other words, our strongest industries like aerospace and agricultural equipment are global industries and they have global demand. I just want to mention that this 20% is based on 2017 data, and that number fluctuates anywhere between 20% up to 28% is what I've seen since we've been tracking it for about a decade. Our markets the largest markets are Canada and Mexico. Other markets that high in the ranking of places that we export to are the United Kingdom, Germany, and even China as an export market. I also want to mention that the supply chains for the companies are globally integrated. So what does that mean? When we look at the companies that export, they're actually purchasing products domestically, and almost all the manufacturers that we work with in the area first and foremost look at domestic supply. But the world is globally integrated, and so we have a global supply chain as well. So it's important that we export. Of course, we've already established why. It supports 40,000 jobs in the area, 20% of our economy, but we also have to keep in mind that we're importing products that actually go into the supply chain for this manufacturing, companies that produce those products that are exported overseas. And in case this is not crystal clear, I already had some input on this. This is new money to our community. So I like to say this in sort of a crude way. When our companies sell stuff overseas, we're getting money from foreigners. That's how it works. So that comes from a foreign source. And that includes any of the countries that we sell to. It could be Canada, Mexico, China, or Europe. Those funds come to the United States, specifically to the Wichita MSA and Sedgwick County, directly from those foreign customers. That is new money. It is economic expansion. It is economic growth, and that is the impact of being a great exporting community. And let me just add that not every community has this kind of stellar track record when it comes to exports. Many of you know we've been participating with the Brookings Institution out of Washington, D.C. in the Global Cities Initiative. That's how we really came to formulate the export plan, a foreign direct investment plan, and recently we completed earlier this year a market prioritization report. Other cities that are in the Global Cities Initiative, I think we're the highest or one of the highest in that group, and we're about third highest in the nation when it comes to export dependency. Other cities in that group, it's in a single digit, so they're not as export dependent as we are. So their goals on the export plan are a little bit different than ours. They may be just trying to improve their dependency on exports, really just improve their overall exports. So how does trade benefit local companies? This is the second bullet on our agenda. Specific benefits to companies include they pay higher wages than non-exporting firms. An interesting fact as well is that they actually invest in higher R&D. So what happens when a company exports to a foreign country? They have to meet the needs of that foreign country, whether it be a different type of product that consumer wants, or meeting different regulations, which is a challenge for companies but also has benefit. So when they're able to meet the demands of that foreign market, the company actually takes the benefit back into the community, into their company here in Sedgwick County, and they're able to use that to be more competitive and to provide differentiation characteristics vis-a-vis their other competitors in the United States. So that R&D comes back in. Maybe they do the R&D to actually help them compete in the foreign market, but then they're able to use that R&D here as well. They have more diverse markets, so we've heard from companies that because they have exports, a national downturn will not affect them as much, so we have companies that are stabler. And I talked about the innovative part, they're actually more productive and profitable overall than non-exporting companies. Over the years, we worked to solve problems and answer questions to help companies export more, but it wasn't very efficient. The export plan allowed us to develop what we call an export ecosystem and to get more people involved in the process to help these companies. Those resources included local, state, and national resources, as well as global resources. And we needed people to work together toward this one goal of expanding our exports and diversifying our exports. A key element of our export ecosystem is understanding all those elements that are required, those different types of services, whether it's government relations or whether it's funding or whether it's education or whether it's CPAs or attorneys that actually have expertise in different facets of international trade. So your question should be to me, and I think the question I'm really supposed to be answering today is it working? I will tell you what we learned over the years is that you have to have two key elements. The first thing you have to have is expertise that's locally accessible, that understands in great detail the process of exporting. That's what you have at Kansas Global. So we have a team of people at Kansas Global who make themselves available to Kansas companies who understand deeply the export process, whether it be trade compliance, adhering to U.S. Export regulations, or whether it be understanding how to enter a foreign market. The second element you have to have is the ecosystem. So first you have to know that you need an ecosystem. Second, you have to understand who's in the ecosystem. And then you have to connect the dots between the companies that need those services and the people who provide them. Now this seems like a real no-brainer thing, and it seems like it's really easy. And it's not difficult. We're not talking rocket science here, but there has to be a process to make those two things happen, or to make exports happen. The first, again, is you have to understand the process to do international trade. The process for exporting, you have to have deep professional experts to do that. And the second is you have to have access to the ecosystem. You connect those two things, and we get faster results. So you should be asking me at this point, how do you know it's faster? Well, we're comparing ourselves to other global cities in the Brookings Initiative. And what we found is that what Brookings is telling us is that our numbers are better than cities that are bigger than us even. And we believe it's because we have those two elements working together. So, export plan. So for the third quarter, the most recent quarterly plan, it's working. According to the 5-year plan goals, You're seeing the graphic there reminding you of the objectives on the side: catalyze export growth, diversify exports for non-aerospace goods and all services, as well as coordinate export assistance and promotional efforts, increase global fluency of the Wichita region, and increase exports of small and medium-sized companies. We should be at 75% or greater for each of those objectives, and you can see that's that bar, that horizontal bar that rolls across the middle of the slide. And you can see that for each of those objectives, we're beyond the 75%. And what does that translate to in dollars? When we initially formed the export plan metrics, we didn't have this metric in there. But actually from people in this room, Commissioner Ranzau, who really pushed us by asking tough questions to say what the actual result was, we added this metric. So we're actually tracking new exports as a result of using the export plan. So these are only companies who have directly used the export plan that we can track it back. And who have reported directly to us that they entered a new country for the first time. This is a cumulative over the 4 years. And so it goes through 2017, about the third quarter. About this time every year, we start collecting the previous 12 months results. It also has a bit of a lag. So it takes about 9 to 12 months on average for a company to enter a new market once they have all the resources in place, for them to develop those relationships and to get those products over. So you see a little bit of a lag there as well. And just make sure nothing else I want to mention to you. 28.6 million. Some questions I was anticipating that you might have. This also includes result from the Export Accelerator Grant, what Sedgwick County contributed to the formation of. We have a total pool of $100,000, of which $50,000 was matched by J.P. Morgan Chase. Of that, we have about $15,000 left that has not been encumbered. But we don't have all the results from the companies using that from that lag. So we have a little bit of money left. So if you know of any companies that want to export and maybe want to look at a grant to help them do that, certainly let us know. In terms of the breakdown of the numbers, just some things that might interest you. 20 new markets were entered, so 20 new countries were entered using the export plan and the Export Accelerator Grant. It's a reporting from about 10 to 15 different companies is making up that 28.6 million in the Export Accelerator Grant, plus tens of companies that are also contributing to that number. Non-aviation exports are about $7 million of that. And that number is actually higher now. So I'll stop with the presentation and ask if you have any questions for me or ask for clarification. But before you do that, I would like to thank you for your years of leadership. I would like to thank you for your vision. I've told you this before. I hope I've told you before. Not every city, not every county, not every community has an export plan. We're one of about 30 in the nation, and your leadership helped make that happen. I hope you'll consider the continued funding for the $40,000. I think Brent has provided you some information. It's Sedgwick County's contribution to the total. And I wanted to thank you for the previous years and hope that we can continue the relationship. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Questions from the commissioners?
Just one question, I guess. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd say thank you for the presentation. I think the numbers speak for themselves. I think that this is obviously a good economic development investment by Sedgwick County, and I think it's making a difference. And so I think it's good to see these performance measures. I noticed on a lot of the slides it says years 4 or 5. So what happens in the future?
That's a really good question. And so let me just answer it this way. This is a long way of saying I don't know yet. But let me answer it this way. Kansas Global will continue to provide services, regardless of whether we have an export plan that is funded and managed in this way. The services that we provide to Kansas companies is needed. We are serving more companies every day, every week, every year, so we'll continue. It largely depends on what happens with economic development and the funding and the will of the community. I hope that we'll continue with maybe not another 5 years. It's quite a long time for a plan, to tell you the truth. I think another 3-year plan might be good, and I hope that it will include not just exports, increasing exports and diversification of exports, but I hope it will also start to look at how we attract and measure foreign direct investment as well. That's a transparent answer for you. I don't know, but those are my hopes.
I guess originally, and I've been supportive of this from the very beginning.
Yes, thank you.
Karen. I view this as a kind of a startup investment, trying to get this thing moving forward. And I know it's fee for service, and so we don't get access to all of your numbers. We only see, I guess, our $40,000. We don't really know exactly how big the budget is and exactly, the rest of the numbers and stuff. And so I guess for me to know what we do after year 5, I guess I'd like to know more about, the rest of the picture. That would help me, I guess, a little bit.
Well, the only thing I can't show you is anything related to personnel. But I'm happy to provide to this body or any. I've always said we have nothing, nothing to hide. You can look at those. Our budget is our total budget is a little around $600,000. So it's not a big budget. And we put together the entire budget from both contracts like this one that support the export plan, as well as we have a contract, for example, with the state of Kansas that's specific to outreach to Kansas companies. The majority of our budget is taken up from staff. So as you can imagine, with someone, a company that provides services, your biggest asset is the brains that you're able to employ in the company. So it's 2/3 of the budget is staffing.
I have 2 more questions. I'll ask them back to back, and you can answer them, and I'll stop talking. So, can you talk about any other government partners that might be also investing in a part, parallel to Sedgwick County? And then, second of all, talk about tariffs a little bit.
Okay. Let me answer the first question, and then I want to ask a little clarifying question on the second one. So the other partners are the City of Wichita is the largest funder of the export plan. They committed to $200,000 for fiscal year 2017. We operate on a calendar year. I don't know what's going to happen for year 5. I'm sure as many of you or all of you know that changes are that we go into Greater Wichita Partnership and there may be some budget cuts. We're anticipating those cuts in our conversation with the City of Wichita Economic Development Team. We don't really know what the number is, of course, yet, but we're anticipating, and maybe it's around $175,000 or $180,000 that would come from that source. So we have to look at some, cuts in the services provided. If you look at the detail on the quarterly reports, Brent provided you some detail. You'll see some boxes around some of those objectives that are, and there's a note that says we're going to be cutting this because of anticipated changes. Other funders are the partners around the area. What we did to figure out who should pay for what or how much they should pay was we took the total exports for the 10-county region and applied a percentage to each county. So Sedgwick County makes up the bulk of the 10-county region's total exports. And from that, we then applied that same percentage to the total annual budget, which is a little under $300,000. It's more around it's a little closer to $200,000 now, or $250,000. And so that's how we divided up the numbers. So Sedgwick County has the biggest exports. So we're asking Sedgwick County as a whole to pay the largest portion of the export plan annual operating expense. The second question, did I answer that sufficiently for you? The second question, can you be more specific? What's your question about tariffs?
Well, we've seen new tariffs, I guess. Nationally, there's been a lot of discussion about tariffs and how that might impact our economy. And I've heard through you, actually, as I attended the SCAC meeting about 8 months ago or so, about how the tariffs have maybe a larger impact on Sedgwick County. And so can you please talk about that?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. It's such a big topic. That's why I was asking exactly what you wanted to know or which direction you wanted me to go. And so some of you may already know that I serve as the chair of Industry Trade Advisory Committee number 9. And we serve we represent the views across the nation of small, medium, and minority business in terms of international trade policy to the U.S. government. What that means is we advise the government on the impact of trade policy that's being created or trade policy that's already occurred, including tariffs, and what the impact would be on small, medium, and minority businesses across the nation. So why did I start by answering your question that way? Well, it's just to tell you that I have some insight that is beyond the media. I can't talk to you about all the stuff that I know because it's clearance information, but I can tell you that our work with Kansas companies tells us that costs have increased for their inputs. So why this impacts Kansas companies more is really important. It's because we're manufacturers. And because of that globally integrated economy, they can't just buy their manufacturing inputs from U.S. sources. They buy them from whoever get the most value. And oftentimes they come from foreign sources. So when you have tariffs on goods coming into the United States, it increases the input costs for our manufacturers. I'm a free trader, which means no tariffs I would be happy with. No tariffs throughout the world I'd be happy with, because then we'd have goods that would move freely throughout the world, and our companies could compete just on their differentiated services, on their differentiated attributes. But in the case of tariffs, especially aluminum and steel tariffs, I've looked at this every way I can think about it, and I can't find any benefit to our companies. I actually just had a conversation with one of my committee members yesterday evening. He's in Amarillo, Texas, and he and I actually don't agree on this. And so he was trying to convince me of why this would be important. And I said, look, the companies that I represent in Kansas, it's just costing us more money. In December of last year was the first time we heard of a local company having to face the impact of these tariffs, which was about 4 months before the tariffs were actually implemented. So just the rumor of the tariffs being enacted by the U.S. government started price increases on aluminum and steel for our manufacturers. We've heard from companies that it's increased anywhere from 12 to 40%. So if your margin won't accommodate those price increases or won't accommodate them forever, then what a company will end up doing is actually having to raise their prices, which could make them less competitive. If they can't sell their product, then as we've discussed, it's such a big impact, it's likely that they would have to lay off workers. So those aluminum steel tariffs, they can't go away fast enough, in my opinion. And I'm not alone in that, just so you know. The U.S. Chamber has just started a big campaign this week to get rid of those aluminum and steel tariffs. Regarding the Chinese tariffs, I have a slightly different opinion. The tariffs on imports from China are affecting our companies. But I don't know what other action the U.S. government could have taken to stop China from being a bad actor. China is guilty of what it's being accused of intellectual property theft, and those kinds of things. And slapping tariffs on them may not get us the results we're looking for, but it certainly has gotten their attention and the attention of the world. I don't like them, but I don't know what else we could have done to say stop this. And the reason the World Trade Organization, the WTO, in my opinion, has failed miserably in its ability to enforce the protection of intellectual property in this example for China. The U.S. government has for years had taken many actions through the WTO against China and won many of them. I mean, you guys don't see this in the media, but we see those reports coming out, and we're talking hundreds of cases that they've put forth through the WTO. So that wasn't working. So what else could we do? Again, it's painful to me to say this to you as someone who would just appreciate tariffs going away altogether. But in the case of China, I don't know what else we could have done. We could have maybe done it a little bit differently. Maybe the sequence of the tariffs. China tariffs before aluminum and steel would have given us the opportunity to work with our trade partners throughout the world, whether it's the EU, the European Union, or whether it's Canada, and kind of banded together and everyone done tariffs. That would have, I think, had a greater impact than what we did now. But when we put aluminum and steel tariffs and included our trading neighbors, Canada and Mexico and Europe, that kind of ticked them off, as you would imagine. So they didn't want to play with us on the China front. So China, I don't like them, but and I don't think that the administration has fully considered the total impact. But again, I don't know what else we could have done. Long answer to your question, obviously, but that's my opinion on it. Other questions?
Other questions? Commissioner Rantow.
Yeah, that 28 million is over how many years?
It includes 3 years of data.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have an itemized list of companies, amounts, projects, countries?
We do, but we don't publish that information just to protect the competitive position of the company, but we do have them.
Okay, I'd like to see it.
We don't publish it. I can ask. We don't publish it because, I'm going to guess what you're thinking. Well, we contribute $40,000. We're a public organization. We should get that information, and I can understand why you would argue that. However, if we publish that information, it could harm the company that received the benefit and got those new exports.
Can you provide the report without the company name?
We can try.
I'm just trying to break down the data, validate the data, look at it, and understand that. And I like to see aircraft versus non-aircraft.
In the quarterly reports, you actually see that number. And when I send over the quarterly reports, I send a live Excel workbook where you can dig into all that data. So you can see how many instances in each of those categories where that breakdown is. It's just aggregated, so it protects the company name. However, if a company allows us to talk about that, we can make that information public.
Okay, so the data without the company's name, is that a yes or a no?
I said we can try. Basically, I'll have to go and ask all the companies. So let me put it to you this way. Is it worth it to you for me and my staff to spend the extra time and for the companies to spend the extra time for us to give you that list and get the permission? Or can you look at the quarterly report that we've provided and have been provided for 4 years and trust that the data we're providing is accurate?
I think you should have, from the very beginning, been keeping a running total. You ought to already have a spreadsheet doing that.
We do have that.
That's all I'm asking.
I'm saying we don't provide that publicly.
Well, that's disappointing, but yeah, I would think you should go back and see if you could share this with the people who are paying.
I'll see if we have time.
You talked a lot about manufacturing, but in this 10-county MSA that we're worried about, there's a large amount of agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you keep track of your agricultural exports?
We do when it comes to processed ag. So if it's a commodity like soy or cotton, have you guys noticed that cotton's being grown here? It just shocks me when it's beautiful. Or wheat. That is not part of our numbers. We work with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, but on processed ag. So that would be like milled flour or soybean oil, that sort of thing. But mostly the KDA takes the lead on that. And we get to work with the manufacturers that have something to do with ag. So commodities are not something we work with. And that's largely due to the nature of how that industry works. They sell to local co-ops, who then it gets aggregated, and Cargill or ADM sells that globally. So there's not a lot we can do to influence, an increase in exports in that particular industry.
I guess what I'm worried about, we just finishing up harvest on a lot of different products right now. Me personally, we just finished Milo, and I just sold it for $3.19 a bushel. Well, if I was trying to live off that, I couldn't live off that, and our farmers can't live off $3.19 a bushel for their Milo. So what are we doing to be able to support those farmers in the state of Kansas to find exports where that we can raise the price of the grain so that we can give our farmers a living wage?
I think that's a really good question, and a complicated one, as I'm sure you already understand. Our efforts in promoting exports at the local level, the state level, and at the federal level, as well as the global level, include agriculture exports. So there's nothing I can tell you or provide to you in a spreadsheet that would tell you that we have explicitly helped with that. But when we're messaging, I was in Austria last week at the EU, or meeting with the U.S. government and the European Union, the European Commission, and part of what I was doing was promoting Kansas exports, looking for those opportunities as a whole. Also, when I'm working in Washington, D.C., we're looking at the total opportunity for Kansas exports, which includes ag. So, for example, if I have an opportunity, I might meet with someone from the USDA or the USDA negotiator to make sure that our views are being considered in U.S. Trade policy.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Anyone else in the room have questions about our trade policy and what we're doing with Kansas global trade? Well, once again, we appreciate you coming and the latest information. I share Commissioner Howell's interest in what happens after year 5, so that we can figure out where we're going forward and keep us informed of what's happening with the tariffs. We just saw yesterday on the news GM closing a number of plants because of a number of reasons, but one is the cost of steel is going up. I think they said over $1 billion,
Right.
Which impacts everybody, not just General Motors, but everybody here too.
I should mention, I know you were concluding, but I should mention there is a product exclusion process that's still open for aluminum and steel tariffs. What that means is a company can apply to the U.S. government for their product that they're importing aluminum and steel to be excluded from tariffs. It's a extensive process. We have helped one company go through that process on the China tariffs. But I wish that more of like the local manufacturers, we don't have any in the auto industry significantly, but in the aircraft industry would take a closer look at that, because they don't need to pay 15 and 25% tariffs. Possibly they could get an exclusion request. That is open until like December 5th or 6th or something like that. So that's one option for our companies.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. We look forward to your next.
Thank you. I'll keep
briefing.
you up to date. And Commissioner Rounds, I will take a look and see what I can do to meet your request. But no promises at this point, but I'll see what I can do. Thank you all.
Thank you. What else you have, Mr. Manager?
That's it.
Very good. Sheriff Easter, do you have anything today?
I just want to introduce Colonel Brian White. As you know, Colonel Dietzman is retiring December 22nd. She's over jail operations. Colonel White comes to us from the police department. Been there for 29 years as a captain. And we're happy to have him on board, but he will be the person that's going to be in charge of jail operations from this point forward. So,
Very good. Well, thank you and welcome. I saw a new face in the audience, so I figured the sheriff had something to say this morning. And are you going to have a party for Colonel Dietzman?
we are. I don't know. I think it's the 14th.
14th.
Is what we have planned over in the jury room.
Very good. Well, thank you.
We'll get
welcome.
lights out.
Mr. Arnold, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Nothing you can think of. Very good. Tanya. Anything today? Oh, congratulations on your latest election to vice chairman of the Sedgwick County GOP. And thanks for everything you did the past 2 years as chairman. Thank you. Any other electeds that I missed in the office or in the room today? See nothing? Any of the staff have anything today? Very good. Anything else from the commissioners? All right. I guess we're adjourned. Thank you all.